Julian. Good morning. This is Julian. We are now live on YouTube. I just realized that we are in the how-to and style section, which is sort of funny. I'm trying to get this camera not to fall off the front of the car. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Hello, everybody. This is the Christmas edition of our weekly lecture. Jeneline has her Christmas coffee mug. I believe there may be some cookies along the way. I'm going to move this a little bit. Now I broke it. Okay, excellent. There we go. I'm going to move this just a little bit so that it's not in the way. This is the Christmas edition of our class. It is very dark. It is early in the morning. You can probably see that on your screen a little bit. Very different from when we used to film these classes in the summer. Jeneline is getting us a cup of coffee. I believe there are some Christmas cookies involved. For those of you joining us for the very first time today, welcome. This is a lecture. We don't know what to call it, a lecture, a soliloquy, a monologue, something like this. And the idea is basically that every Monday I, again, teach a class in which we explore a theme over the course of 12 weeks. In this case, it is the theme of nothingness, a lecture on nothing, except every lecture is standalone. And so what that means is that you can join us at any point. If this is your very first class, then stay, be welcome, because there's nothing that you've missed that you'll need for this class. But on the other hand, if you want to go back to the previous classes, we always teach these in a dialectic fashion, which means that the idea is that if you start with this lecture, you should be able to go back to the previous lecture and hopefully see it in a completely different light. There is no real chronology to these lectures. They're taught in sequences of 4. In other words, it is a chiasmic lecture. So we have 4 sequences of 3. This one, if you're not confused yet, is the 3rd class within our first sequence of 3. Okay, I have no idea where Jeneline is, so I am stalling a little bit. I think that she is on her way. There's a lot of things we're going to cover today. This is going to be the last class in which we go into the idea of the role of God, capital G, because in the previous 2 classes, as you know, we focused on God first as a problem, and then we focused on the idea of an absent God, as it were. So this is, in a sense, also this is how you can split the existentialist between those who said that, you know, they come from a religious perspective and those who come from a non-religious perspective. Famously, Heidegger's last text was, why there is no God, if there is no God, why we need him anyway. So we're using God, in a sense, as a concept here. So that's what we're going to be doing in this class, and we're just counting down to Jeneline being here. While Jeneline is not here, I want to address a topic that is close to my heart, which is the somewhat awkward setup of having Jeneline sit next to me throughout this class. Those of you who have joined these classes from the very beginning know that I originally taught them myself, and Jeneline agreed to sit there because she enjoyed hearing in, listening in, sitting in on them. Here is Jeneline, speaking of. Thank you very much for the coffee.
You're very welcome.
And so I wanted to say thank you to you for joining us here. And I realized that the setup of man talks, woman sits is sort of fodder for accusations of sexism, and I confess that there's not much I can do about this. So Jeneline,
someone has to be talking.
Jeneline has agreed to play the role of interlocution, which means that she can interrupt me as much as she likes.
See, that's the real power, is being able to interrupt whenever I want and jump in whenever I want. Like,
it's also at this point now where it's not the 2 of us. It strikes me as distinctly odd somehow.
Yeah. But we're going to keep experimenting with different formats and different approaches to teaching, and just kind of see what works and see what you guys are comfortable with and what you enjoy and what you benefit from.
Absolutely.
Just, we don't really know.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we're still figuring everything out. So it's just been wonderful to have you join us. And I think that we're going to bring Jeneline into the teaching. but that's going to be on her own terms.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year. Yeah. Since we are approaching
approaching rapidly.
the end of the year, let us start this lecture.
Yes.
And let us also say that this is the Christmas lecture. This is the Christmas edition of the lecture. Do you know what the Latin term Advent refers to?
Does it just mean calendar?
No.
No. Huh.
Oh, sorry. I don't want to see. I put you on the spot right away. I thought this was one that you knew. Okay.
No.
Advent means arrival.
Oh, I did know that.
As in
Sorry.
the Advent. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's very early here. This is a really mean way to teach. It's like asking a very specific question. But yeah,
No,
Advent.
Okay. That's a good one. Because they're like trivia questions.
Yeah.
Like pub questions. They're not like real questions.
Adventus means arrival.
Yes.
And so Advent means the arrival of course, baby Jesus, etc., all that stuff. We're not going to make it about
the star.
The star, yes, baby star. The arrival of, what is it?
The Three Kings.
The Three Kings, whatnot. So Adventus is about the arrival of something onto the earth, something unheralded, something that has not been witnessed before. Sort of something that will upend the boundaries between life and death, between heaven and earth, etc. Right? We have here sort of the arrival of an event, capital E. What I want to know is, do we have the arrival of Christmas cookies?
We have Christmas cookies because we did not have breakfast. And this week, breakfast is consisting of Christmas cookies.
That's absolutely right.
So we have...
Oh, wonderful.
For you?
Look at this. We have a Bell Christmas cookie.
A bell and a...
Star.
Star?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a...
All right, thanks. I wanted to eat something before we start.
Star.
Thank you for being with us. This is the slowest starting lecture we've had. We're 7 minutes in. If you're still here, thank you. So we've talked a lot about nothingness, right? We're doing a lecture series on nothingness, but the title of the lecture series overall was "If You Really Love Nothing," which means that we're slowly going to have to make a transition from nothingness towards the other key concept in our lecture series, which is love. Love. Exactly. I'm going to let Jenny wake up. It's fine. We're tired. We were up late last night watching the Queen's Gambit until like 1:30 in the morning. Okay. So, what?
Yeah. No, I'm
Is this a confession?
This is a confession.
Okay. I'm going to just launch in with high energy. Pistis. Pistis. The word pistis from the Greek is if you're interested in theology, the word pistis is the kind of word that will tell people exactly where you are in terms of like theological battles and debates. And the word pistis has, well, let me put it this way. The word pistis simply means the faithfulness of God. The faithfulness of God. I remember in the previous two lectures, we talked about God as a problem.
Yes.
And then last week, we talked about God being an eavesdropper. Exactly, like a peeping Tom, listening in on conversations. And so now we've arrived at really a key and a hotbed theological question, which is God faithful? Now, if you're interested in this question, you have to answer the word. You have to understand what the word faith is. What is faith? What does it mean to be faithful? And then the question is, can God be faithful? So this is something that we're going to have to this is something I'd like you to keep in mind as a sub-question.
Yeah. Can I ask you about faithful a little bit more? Because to me, faithful has two meanings. One is like faithful or truth in alignment with a cause or an idea or a fidelity, faithful. But then the other is having faith or belief in something. Right. And those seem like two different things. Do you...
That's a really good question, right? What is faith?
Sorry, I should keep talking and let you chew your cookie.
It's okay. We're really tired today. This is like one of the shortest days of the year.
It is. Today is the shortest day of the year.
That's why it's so dark. Okay, so the question was, what is faith? Let's see if we can put that into like a 1 minute thing. So you've introduced a couple of different notions of faith. And we usually, you said fidelity, right? Which would be the Latin for loyalty.
Yeah.
Faith, if you are faithful, you could see someone as a faithful spouse. I will not sleep around because I'm faithful to my spouse. Something like this.
We're faithful coffee drinkers because we don't drink anything else.
Yeah, a dog doesn't just walk off with another master because he's faithful to one master. So in the word pistis, usually it would be that is not the kind of faith that is implied. Because the idea would be that it's not about whether God is loyal to a principle or to a master. In other words, it's not that God is like a dog who's obedient.
Okay.
So pistis is usually not translated as loyalty.
Okay.
But keep that in mind, because we're going to explore how we could maybe actually, reclaim that.
Okay.
As dialecticians, whenever we see two things that are seemingly antithetical, we're immediately drawn to them. So we have fidelity as a form of faith, which usually you would say God is not loyal because God can't be loyal to something.
God doesn't play favorites.
And then the other one, God definitely plays favorites, though. God plays favorites in my life all the time. Although, how else would I be here with you this morning having cookies? And so the other way that you can think about faith is as the opposite of knowledge.
Okay.
Because knowledge presumes that you know something about the world that you can retain. Whereas to not know something means that you have to take it on faith.
Right.
I have to, for example, I have faith that this coffee is totally fine, not poisoned. There's an example of this. When the pandemic hit, and I think Stephen Colbert pointed this out as well, Pizza Hut had this big ad where they said, now, during the pandemic, we will assure you that between making the pizza and going into the box, no one will touch it. And it's like, wait, what? Are you saying people used to touch the pizzas? Do you see what I mean? Like, so we act in faith.
We're gonna start washing our hands now.
Yeah. So faith is when there's an absence of knowledge and you have a sort of radical trust that something can be not known. I have faith in something because I don't need to know it.
Yeah.
And this is also why faith is, of course, a condition of love. Because love in its most direct form, probably talked about this before, is to say, I have faith in the other person. I have faith in that other person's affection for me, in the love for me. The most neurotic question you could ask someone in the world is to say, do you love me? Because it's impossible to answer that question truthfully, in a sense, because you cannot measure that quantity except through faith.
And I feel like the line of, I know he loves me, but is like such a trope of rom-coms for the failed romance.
Well,
like once you pinpoint love into a knowledge or a certainty, then it undermines the faith of it.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Like part of love is the questioning of love. So introducing a good term here again is the idea of doubt, right? So true love would be love that is doubted because it cannot be fully confirmed. It has to remain in the sense in the open. But this is also where faith as a form of fidelity comes in, because love has to be continuously renewed. Love is not something that you can take for granted. I think this is something as a married person, I think. Like love is something that you have to continuously demonstrate and show because it is unprovable as a word. So to be a loving partner or a loving person is to demonstrate over and over again, as if you were just beginning or just falling in love for the first time, I love you, because you can't put it down in stone. For example, we record this lecture and it exists out there on the internet. And unless we have some kind of, I don't know, reckoning in which all files are wiped, it exists out there. That is not the case for love. Love is something that you can't tie down, so you can manifest love, but you can't actually sort of make it concrete. And in a sense, that's the failure of love, right? And that's why you have to have loyalty to the sort of continual growing of love.
Right.
Okay, so we've got faith here, but the question was, dear friends, is God faithful? And if we think about it, okay, so is God either loyal to something, or does God have an absence of knowledge? And both of those seem to be inherently impossible, because we think about the idea of God as being omniscient, as being all-knowing. And if you're all-knowing, then there's no reason why there would be faith in your catalog of things you could do. And vice versa, if you are the creator of everything, then you can't really be loyal to anything. save perhaps in the way that the father is loyal to a child or something. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
We can solve this, my dear friends, but we're not going to solve it now because this is not a theology lecture. This is a chiasmic nothingness philosophy lecture. So keep all those things in mind, and we're going to build it up.
Yeah, and I think it's worth reiterating that this is God in the sense of a philosophical problem, not in the sense of a
Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or Morgan Freeman, if that works for you. If you want to imagine Morgan Freeman.
If you want to imagine Morgan Freeman, you can.
We can do
He's earned that right.
We could do a lecture series on why American pop culture portrays Black people as omniscient, all-powerful creators, while clearly not living up to this ideal. Are you saving up that cookie?
I have one more cookie for you.
No, you should eat it.
It's a cinnamon cookie, and
Is
it's
it
an
a crab
odd shape
cookie?
because it was from the leftover dough.
This cookie could either be a knuckle duster.
I'm too lazy to roll out cookie dough.
Could be a knuckle duster, or it could be. I don't know what it is. Okay, thank you very much. That's really kind. Do you want a bite?
No.
You sure?
No.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so excuse me for talking about my mouth.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that does have cinnamon in it.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
good.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sticking with us. We're a bit slow today, but we've got time.
Yes.
Could you say something while I chew?
No, well, the other thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about Advent and arrival, I don't know if you're circling back to that, but one of the things that really stuck with me from last week's class was the notion that the relationship between birth and baptism is we've gone too far, yet we haven't gone far enough. And I think that that's a really interesting way to think about the human condition. It's like the positions that we put ourselves in, the things that we do, it's like we've gone too far and yet we haven't gone far enough. And this tension between responsibility, expectations,
yeah, I'm really glad.
An external sort of affirmation is really interesting.
I'm glad that you said that because these lectures were about the problem of beginning, right? They weren't just about the problem of God. They were specifically about the problem of beginnings and what it means to say that there is a beginning to something and whether or not such a thing exists. So what you pointed out here, which is we've gone not far enough, but we've gone, what is it? We've gone too far, but not
far enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you think about that, that's true, for example, with what you could call the paradox of the social contract.
Well, and it makes me think of like Frankenstein's monster. Like we've gone too far and yet we haven't gone far enough at the same time. Like this, I just feel like I really see that in a lot of ways. Anyway, sorry.
You started seeing, well, that's ideal because what we want to do in these classes is that we want to sort of plant the seed of a thought in your mind so that you can then be seeing it elsewhere.
Yes.
That's a Socratic ideal. We're not telling you what to think. We're not even telling you how to think. We're simply telling you to think. Not that I need to tell you that. Okay, so can I? Oh, you're going to say?
Yeah, because it can be such a challenge when you read something in a book that's really thought-provoking, and then you close the book and you walk away from it, and that's the end of the thought. But when the thought sort of lingers with you, and you continue to see it echoed in what you experience or other things that you read, then that's helpful. Sorry, I was interrupting you.
No, you're supposed to interrupt me. I'm really glad that you do. That's what keeps these things on track and what keeps it edgy. The social contract. And there's a paradox of the social contract. Because think about this for a moment. If you say I'm going to be in a social contract, right? The Rousseau's idea of a society in which we have an implicit, non-formal understanding of what that society is.
Well, I would
Rousseau.
say Locke, but okay. Yes.
Is it? Okay, you can decide for us. That's totally fine. The gauntlet has been thrown here.
Social contract is different, but yes.
French versus English. Am I using Locke's version of social contract, not Rousseau? I think it's Rousseau.
Okay, go for it.
We'll see. We'll see. This is excellent. I like this a lot. And okay, so the paradox of the social contract is that in order to say we're going to have a social contract, there already is a social contract. There's no point at which you go from nothingness towards social contract. It's not like we're having like a party of apes in the jungle banging around on something, and then we get together and we say, wouldn't it be great if we had a social contract?
Yes.
No, you're in a social contract in order to formulate the concept social contract.
Yeah.
And so if you look at that, here we have, look, you're Yeah, see, Jenny got this one. Hey, this is excellent.
I mean, Rousseau has a social contract as well, but he's playing with Locke's conception. But a traditional like social contract, like in a conservative sense, is Locke. Definitely.
Yeah, I think I will always go to Rousseau if I can.
Do you know why I decided to study French in high school?
No.
It was because of Rousseau.
Really?
Yeah. I didn't want to learn Spanish. There's no good philosophy.
Because of Rousseau. That's really interesting.
It's really high schooling, isn't it? Okay.
I wanted to learn French because I wanted to write really lengthy letters to people, because that's all we did in French class was really formal letters. It would be things like you'd order flour from the local bakery, and then you had to like ask to like thank them profusely, stuff like this. Letter writing was a big part of my
that was
French.
a big part of our education.
The epistolary
yes.
language. Okay.
Social contract.
Okay, social contract. So you're already in it. And the only way that it makes sense to think of the social contract is if you step out of a linear type of thought.
Right.
And okay, now you see you're warming up. I love this. I love this. You're really warming up.
Well, and that's the whole problem is even if you say there is a period of time pre-social contract and then a social contract is established, what does it mean for children who are born into the social contract? Because they never experience pre-social contract. So there is no moment in which they say, this is something I want to fit into. And it's important to remember that these ideas were really developed before nationalism. And so the sense of being a citizen or being a voter or being like, adhering to the Constitution or something was the defining identity characteristic of a person. Yeah.
I can't say anything on this because I don't know my Locke. Like, I skipped that part. I mean, I know Locke, but that's about it. Tenet. You and I watched the film Tenet, Christopher Nolan, and we could probably spend an hour at least talking about Tenet, but there's one thing in particular that you don't need to have seen them film, and there's no spoilers in this. One of the characters says to another character, you have to stop thinking in linear terms, because they're having like a military briefing, and he's saying, well, this happens and then that happens, and the general sort of brusquely says, you have to stop thinking in linear terms. This is what every idealist philosopher will tell you. That is the whole point of these last 3 lectures is you have to stop thinking in terms of chronology. We're not talking about A, B, C. We're talking about a chiasmic structure. We're talking about an inverted entropy of the idea of beginning itself. Right. And so it's funny because you watch Tenet and it's really confusing. But if you're into German idealism, you kind of just go like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And it's can I go do a very brief Tenet thing? And if you want to jump in here, you can as well. Yeah. So one of the things that people say about Tenet is that it's broken because of the exposition. But I decided that I have a defense against this. Yes. Because if there's a problem in Hegel, it's the problem of exposition. Hegel is fixated on the problem of exposition, which is if you're trying to tell the story of German idealism, you're trying to put the Hegelian logic together, then you can't have anything extraneous to it. In other words, when you use examples, they're kind of breaking your system because they have to be already part of your system. And so Inception has the same problem, which is anything that is told about the movie has to be wrapped back into the unfolding of the movie. And the reason that it seems like he has an exposition problem is because the exposition is necessarily jarring in a movie that unfolds from within. Yeah, having a lot of exposition and a lot of action feels like, I mean, you sort of have whiplash a bit from it. Yeah. And you and I have that problem with these lectures, which is for us, these examples are entirely contingent. They're accidental. Right. We could teach every one of these classes with different examples. The theory is in place. We know what we want to say about the theory, or we think we do. Yeah. The examples are contingent. And that's the problem that Christopher Nolan has with the exposition. But that's also the freedom of these lectures. So, for example, if we say, well, we want to write this into a book, then it seems superfluous to have the examples. But then if you just write the book, then it's just Hegel. So Tenet for a moment, right? I'm glad to be here. Yes, Tenet. Tenet. The character says you have to stop thinking in linear terms. But then the question is, if you're not thinking in linear terms, what terms are you thinking in? And remember last week we had the phenomenological, I can say it now, phenomenological reduction, which was the idea of stepping away from the object towards consciousness, as it were, to contemplation of what is my mind thinking instead of what is the object doing. And it's important to say that for Husserl, I can say this now. Husserl, I've been standing in front of the mirror saying this, that it's not enough to have the phenomenological reduction because it can't be complete. You can't actually fully step away from the world towards the self. It's simply not possible. We can move away from it, but we can't complete it, at least not in life. So what he has is the eidetic reduction, or the eidetic reduction, E-I-D-E-T-I-C, which is, it's not enough to move away from the world of objects. We also have to move away from the world of self. So it's like, whoa, how do we do that? And the way that we do that is to ask the question, which is a Sartrean question: is there a phenomenon of being? Is there an appearance of being? In other words, not just is there the being of appearance, which would be the phenomenological reduction, but is there the appearance of being? How does being come into place? Now, to put away being for a side, it also means that we have to ask, and this is a question that you can understand without any kind of philosophical background. Can consciousness be conscious of itself? Is there a consciousness of conscious? Can you give like a totally just a guess, like totally stabbing in the dark, like a gut reaction to that question? No?
Well, it reminds me of, I think I've shared this before, like the creepiest thing to eat is tongue, because it's like the mouth eating the mouth in a sense. And it's really uncomfortable. So it's not even about, are you able to do it? It's like, what is that experience? What is the grappling with it?
Yeah, you're correct to say that there's like a folding onto itself here, right? A paradox of sorts. You could think of it in this way, right? Because we've got the phenomenological reduction and the eidetic reduction. Phenomenological reduction, blah, 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 blah. I can't say these words. Why are they so hard to say? My tongue is eating itself.
No, don't think about it.
Okay. We're moving
phenomenological reduction.
Moving away from objects towards the self. Eidetic reduction, moving away from the self towards the object. So where are we at this point if we've moved away from all these things? We're trying to get to like some zero-sum level. Doctor Who can help us. One of the more well-known story arcs in Doctor Who is the one about the weeping angels. Right?
Yes.
Can you briefly
the stone
summarize?
Statues who are like usually have their face covered, but they can only move when it's dark. And so, you know, there's going to be the flickering match or
not just
candle.
Dark, but when you're not looking at them.
When you're not looking at them.
Okay,
Thank you.
We'll illustrate this here. I am a stone angel or whatever, weeping angel, something like this, and Jenny's looking at me. Blah, we're all fine. I'm and I look like, and I come and attack you. Is the opposite of Medusa, basically, right?
Yes.
Instead of being transfixed by the eyes of Medusa, it's as soon as you look away from Medusa.
Yes.
On a whole gender level, you could say that that's another take on Medusa, which is the I'm going to ignore you. So it's the uncanny here, right? Which is that the monster will creep up on you only when you're not looking at it. So there will be movement of the weeping guardian angel, whatever it's called. Right. And when you move back and you look at it, it becomes inert again.
Right.
We have to take are they called weeping angels or what are they called?
I think so.
Do they cry? Is this a thing? Okay. Doctor Who's spooky angels. Christmas theme, right? Doctor Who's spooky angels are how we have to think about where the eidetic, and the phenomenological reduction meet. Because we focus so far on turning away from things. We said we have to turn away from the world. We have to turn away from the self and be in some kind of weird middle space. But we've made the fundamental error, which is we're still thinking in terms of the primacy of us. We think of ourselves as a guy or a girl walking away from the object of worlds or walking away from the self as if it were a place. We're still thinking in linear terms. Whereas where the action isn't in us, it's in the negative space of where we're not looking. So imagine for a moment that we're using the Doctor Who angels here. You look away from the object of worlds. It's the world of objects.
Yeah.
And the world of objects goes, everything starts moving, everything starts creeping up on you. And then we move away from the self, right?
Yeah.
And the self starts going, I'm going to eat you. Blah, blah. And so that inverted motion is how we have to think about that movement, right? It's that what's happening is taking place out there, not despite the fact that we're not looking, but because the fact that we're not looking. That's the radical point you end up with, which is that you have to move away from it in order for it to manifest. Does that make sense?
Yes.
This is also not how the existentialists teach this at all. Let's put a marker here. I am not an existentialist. I like existentialism, but I don't like where it leads you, because existentialism has the same problem that we just had. And then it ends up with saying, well, the ultimate in the world is experience. Yeah. It's all here. It's all me. It's also a very like masculine oriented theory, existentialism, to me, because it's very much this idea of like the ultimate horizon of being is me and my free will in the world and how I can impregnate everything with my own genius.
Yeah.
I'm closer to, I know I'm riffing here, but I'm closer to Nietzsche's Amor Fati, Amor Mundi, which is that you have to love your own fate, that there's a fate, that there's a destiny of sorts, and you have to love it. I like that. I like that idea. Okay, so that's the Doctor Who. We've set up something. This is kind of like a slightly more abstract thing, but we're talking about moving away from things, as it were. Can I? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because we talked about the opposite of that being the way to escape something is to move towards something, and this is sort of the opposite movement, right?
Thank you, thank you for making that explicit. Yes, that is exactly the point. If you follow the last two lectures, we talked about a beginning being a move away from something. In lecture 2, then we've said it's a moving away towards something else, and now we've undermined the idea of moving away in its entirety.
Yes,
there's sort of an empty space there, a very constitutive empty space. There's a lot.
You're gonna say a very pregnant empty space. Like it's a void that needs filling.
Yes, this void is definitely prego. Someone should do a meme with the void, and it's like a pregnancy test. It's like, you're definitely positive. Okay, so I want to segue to something totally different, but everything's leading up to something. So thank you for sticking with us, as it were. Proust.
Yes.
One of the things about Proust is that I have 2 theories about Proust. I mean, a million theories, but 2 very easy theories. One, I think that Proust should be read out loud.
Yes.
And I think that Proust should be read together. Because Proust is really, really funny.
Yes. And you can read Proust aloud to yourself, I think, too.
Yeah.
I'll go that far.
Yeah, no, for sure. It really benefits from that. And because it's shockingly funny in parts. And so I'll sketch you like a very small-chy scene from our domestic life. Is like 1950s nuclear family, except without babies and without all the alcohol. Jeneline was doing her Christmas puzzle. Christmas theme, by the way, of our lecture. And I was reading one of, I don't have a favorite passage, but a very funny passage of Proust to Jeneline.
Yes.
And so Jeneline knows this, I think. Hashtag save this woman. So there's a passage in Proust where it's about routines. It's about daily routines. And daily routines is something that I'm mildly obsessed with. I don't think I'm the only person. I think routines are really interesting. And routines of different people interest me very much. In fact, I've probably
That's why magazine profiles always have what's your daily routine?
I'm a sucker for that. Yeah, no, I love seeing other people's routines.
And I'm just waiting for some hero to say, well, I kind of think about waking up at 1 in the afternoon and have a cigarette and a cup of coffee. I'm just waiting for that interview. I'm waiting for that profile.
Thanks, sis. I'll interview you. It'll be okay. What is your routine? Getting up? No, it's okay. Okay, so the passage in Proust that is about routines.
Mhm.
And it's endlessly fascinating to me because there's a family that lives together in the countryside.
That's very 2020 quarantine.
It's super 2020
Relevant.
quarantine. Super. And there's they have a routine,
Mhm.
which is that every day they have lunch at noon, 12 o'clock. The family gets, Jenny's just laughing already. They get together at noon for lunch. And they do this especially for the elderly character. You're gonna say.
Which is spot on. I also need to say.
It was the aunt, great aunt, I
yes,
forget.
great aunt.
And she's sort of a tyrant. She's the loving tyrant of the household because she's the eldest, and they have to make sure that she's well. And the routine is to have lunch at noon sharp, except for one day, which is Saturday. Because on Saturday they have to send the maid over to the market, which means that on Saturday, in order to get to the market on time, they have to have lunch an hour early at 11 o'clock. And what's really fun about that is that the family takes on like a conspiratorial vibe for it. Saturday becomes like a mini Christmas for them. It's an event.
Yes.
Because there's something in a completely ordinary day that is slightly off.
Well, the habit revolves around the time when you don't have the habit. The unhabitual aspect is what affirms the habit also.
Yes, that's true, right?
Mhm.
So the way it's described is that they keep to their routine of eating at noon,
Mhm.
but the only reason they stick to that is because the real routine is the Saturday exception. And so we're here totally on sort of the Marxist level of the particular that takes on the value of the universal. The universal is embedded in the particular exception.
Yes.
In a sense, Saturday is the working class that embodies the entire project, the entire society. Saturday, the exception of Saturday, I'm glad you find this funny, is the thing that binds all the other routines together.
Yes.
But more importantly, it is a shared conspiracy that binds the family together. Because to have lunch at 11 is an insane proposition, especially in the universe of Proust. Nobody has lunch at 11 o'clock. It's a little bit like saying, I don't know, let's have alcohol for breakfast or something. Like it's just
it's perverse.
Yeah, I agree. It's perverse. And brunch had not yet been invented. So what this family does is on Saturday morning, everything takes on sort of a special shine. It's a little bit like Christmas. Christmas, hate to break it to you, is a day like any other day with more potential for disappointment. And sorry. And that's what Saturday is for them. Every week, there's a day where everything is slightly different, slightly more festive, slightly more interesting, slightly more dangerous because they're having lunch an hour earlier. And you were right to say that. So we're talking about Proust in Search of Lost Time. Right? And if there's any confusion about this, the novel, it sounded so mean. The novel.
You mean it's not a movie?
It's not a movie. It's a graphic novel too. And so for the aunt, who is a super routine person, the routine that matters most to her is the exception. It's and there's a sense that if she were to lose that one routine, which is the exception, if she lost her Saturday exception, she would lose all her other routines. All the routines hinge on the particular that assumes the universal. And
especially because that routine revolves around her. And so any undermining of that routine is an undermining of her. Yeah.
But what it also does is it makes the entire family subject to a particular exception. Because if society has lunch at 12, it means on Saturday, they're special. Yeah. They're different. And so they describe a scene where if someone comes to visit them by the house, and they arrive at 11 and they see the whole family having lunch, this is shocking to people. And what the family does is they don't go, oh, no, it's Saturday. We have to have lunch an hour early because the maid has to go to the market. No, these family revels in the conspiratorial exception and they pretend like everybody else is crazy. Why are you not having lunch at 11? And so the shared madness of having lunch at 11 o'clock becomes the glue that holds the family together. It's the shared lie. It's the shared joy. It's the genuinely perverse pleasure of showing other people that they do it differently.
Yeah.
And so when a guest comes and is shocked and they pretend like he's the crazy one instead of them, when they're gaslighting their guests, as it were, that is the perversity of the social pleasure. And that is true for every society, for every group, for every, I don't know, whether it's philosophers or people who like to go jet ski. It's the sense that you are the real way of living and that everybody else is the exception, even though you are the exception. And the reason that this scene is sort of so early in Proust's novel is because, of course, it's another play on time.
Yeah.
An hour difference doesn't seem to be that much between having lunch at 12 and having lunch at 11. And yet, at the same time, that hour difference becomes the thing that holds the family together because it's the thing that they do that is out of sync. If they had to keep their routine every single day, the family would fall apart. What keeps the family together is their enjoyment at the routine of breaking the routine. And so here we have something of philosophical importance, which is the necessity of the contingent. Right? You take something accidental, which is the maid has to go to the market and we have to have lunch an hour early. Totally contingent.
Yeah, why not lunch at 1?
Totally accidental. And you make that the necessary part of your entire routine.
Yeah.
The routines would fall apart if it weren't for that exception. And this is what Hegel does with necessity and contingency. Is he says it's not that we have the necessary world and the contingent world. It's the contingency of necessity itself and the necessity of contingency.
Yeah, really
they're folded back into each other. And so again, if we say you have to move away from thinking in linear terms, it's not that the 11 o'clock lunch has primacy over the other routines.
Comes first.
Comes first. And it's not that all the other days have primacy and come first. It's that they fold into each other. Because if you look at primacy in terms of importance, clearly the Saturday exception is more important. But vice versa, the actual routine from which is being deviated is also, in a sense, more important. And so here we have the perfect example of how that social bond, you were going to say?
Yeah, well, and it's only important in relationship to the other thing. Like, if you take away one, then the other no longer becomes important, in a sense.
Yeah. They're and that's what makes them necessary, right? They're not just accidental. They need each other in order to be sustained.
Right.
And so it's a really, I think it's a perfect little passage to explain what is a pretty really difficult philosophical problem. So we've reached here a point, which is, in a sense, this family has a conspiracy. Because having lunch at 11, they all pretend like it's normal, and they pretend like everybody else is crazy. This is pretty much at the root of conspiratorial thinking, right? I know something that makes me special. The rest of the world doesn't know it.
Yeah.
You enjoy that elevated position of your complicity, if that's a word.
Yeah.
I don't know, complicitness, something like this. And so I want to make a leap here, which is that is also how love functions. Love is the ultimate conspiracy. When you are in love, you believe that you have something special with that person that nobody else will ever understand, and yet that has to be continuously demonstrated to everybody else. What we used to call PDA, what we now call corona contagion, public displays of affection, is practicing that very same conspiracy.
Right.
We have I'm saying we because I'm inferring that you're still in love with me. I'm still in love with you. That we have a conspiracy against the world, which is our love, and yet we have to demonstrate to the world the exception of our love.
Yes.
And there's something nasty about that. Like it's like when you watch people being overly affectionate, it's a little bit like it's not very pleasant, right? Because it's that very same display.
Yes. And especially if you've ever been in a group where someone has a new partner and they're constantly on their phone to the new partner, and it's disgusting to watch, but it's also totally a sympathetic experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're exactly right? Which is it's both very universal and very particular. And it also functions on the philosophical level. Remember we said the contingency of necessity itself, the necessity of contingency, plays out when you're in love, which is I've met this completely random person in a usually, unless it's an arranged marriage, in a random place, and we had a random drink, maybe even had a random sexual encounter, who knows? And now I've decided being like a quotation marks term, that this person is my destiny, that our love was meant to be. And so you've taken something contingent and you've rendered necessary. And at the same time, the only way to keep it necessary is to make it contingent. Because if you had two people who genuinely said, our love is destined, we were made for each other, I don't like you at all, I don't think you're that great, but it's my destiny to be married to you, that's really, really unromantic. Like, you see what I mean? Like, if you just say, like, what attracts you to your wife? And you say, well, she's my destiny. I don't know. I don't have a say in it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because at that point, you become condemned to that person. Because destiny and fate is a form of being condemned to something outside of your control. And so what love does is that love is a wedge between contingency and necessity. Which is I have the necessity of our accidental encounter. And at the same time, I can enjoy the accident of our exception to the world.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that makes sense, right? And so what love does is it actually stages that movement that we said was impossible. The moving away from the object of the world of objects and the moving away from the self. That happens in love. Because when you're in love, you no longer see yourself through your own eyes. You start seeing yourself through the eyes of your partner.
Right.
And it's funny because, that's the paradox of other people in general. When we go out into the street, we think of how we will be perceived by others. When we speak, we think of how our speech will be interpreted by others. We're constantly framing our own awareness of self based on other people. And in a sense, we talked about this before, we're doomed to this. We're condemned to this. The reason we're talking so much, and I apologize for my talking so much, the reason we talk so much is because we're never fully understood. We don't meld minds, as it were. We can't have synergy between thought and appearance and all that. So the more we talk, the more we understand each other, but the less we understand each other. We're doomed to continual speech. We're doomed to continuously start over. There's no beginning to a conversation, if you see what I mean. There's no point at which you say, this is where it started. And so, and even in a play or a movie, you're being dropped into a narrative, right? It's not like sort of this divine moment of beginning. And so the absence of beginnings is, in a sense, something that we're doomed to, and at the same time, that is deeply productive. And when we go out into the world, it's a really scary place because our ignorance about the world is reflected back to us. Am I communicating in the correct way? Am I appearing in the correct way? You're continuously evaluating how you come across to other people. Your sense of self starts to be made manifest by others. That's why one of the most brutal punishments in our society is to be, isolated, solitary confinement. Thank you, right? Because your sense of, the first thing that breaks down in solitary confinement is your sense of self. We are mediating beings.
Yes.
And what love does, and this is why love is both revelation and salvation, is that love allows us to experience that in a pleasurable way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't worry what the other person thinks of me if I know they love me.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I can't know that they love me, which means that I am also forced to love them.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, we're continuously proving something. This is also why unrequited love is so cruel, because you're making that opening and it's being rebuffed in a sense, right? It sort of goes, I mean, that's a dumb thing to say, but I think everyone's experienced this at some level. Did you want to drop in, or am I still okay?
Go for it. That's great.
Mansplaining
no,
love
it's
here.
really
Okay.
good. It's really good. It's really interesting.
Thank you. I'll take that. And so we have here in love this basically this encounter between the necessary and the contingent. And remember, we were talking about this idea of faith. And so I have a theory about love, which is love is a peculiar mixture between doubt and certainty, which is I am certain of my love, and at the same time, I'm always doubting it. In order to experience love,
because it's not a knowledge thing, it's a faith.
Yeah. In order to have love, you're not just doubting the other person's love, but you doubt your own love. And this isn't in terms of I'm with someone I don't want to be with, should I be with them? It's about saying, I don't know if I can be the partner that I want to be. I don't know if my partner can be the partner that I want to be. Our love is in a sense also a project. It's something that we're working on through acts of love, through expressions of love, through what have you. It is a project that is always in the process of beginning. Every day when you go to bed, you think to yourself, can I love more? Can I love again? Can I love differently? That's a constant, it's the reaffirmation, but it's also starting again. Couples fight, for example. Fighting is not a sign of a breakdown of relationship at a certain point, but it's what you do with that fight, right? And so expressions of love aren't always expressions of affection. Freud was very aware of this. Freud said that the most common way to express hate is when you're feeling love. So what he means by that is that when you want to say I love you, a lot of people say I hate you. It's a little bit like a mother and a daughter. If a mother wants to say I love you and the daughter doesn't want to hear it, the mother will feel rebuffed. So what does the mother do? She says something like something nagging, like, why didn't you clean up the counter or something like that? Because then she is guaranteed attention.
She's provoking the reaction.
Yeah. And so what we do is that when we want attention from someone, we provoke them because love doesn't provoke directly. If you go and say, I love you, people don't immediately give you attention. If you go and say, I hate you, people give you attention. So hate becomes a vehicle of love, as counterintuitive as that is. And vice versa, love can be a vehicle of hate.
Well, it confronts love as a doubt and a faith aspect also.
Because the love of the mother is continuously expressed as a form of doubt as to whether the daughter can love her the way that she loves the daughter.
Yeah, because children don't do that to their parents.
They nag them another way.
Usually, I think.
I realize I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but so there's one of the things that I want you to that I would say about love is that there is love defies direct correspondence. So love does not equate anything. There is no love is. Love emerges between the cracks of other things. Whether it's the idea of destiny versus free will, whether it's the idea of necessity and contingency, whether it's the idea of feeling powerful and feeling weak.
Well, and moving towards the external world and moving towards the self.
In a very radical theological sense, or maybe actually not that radical, quite common. This is how the Trinity works. God, one element. Christ, embodiment of God on earth, but also the failure of God. The death of Christ is the material failure of God on earth. And what's really important is that the Holy Spirit is the sublimation in Hegelian terms. The Holy Spirit arises as love, right? Because agape, love in the Christian sense, doesn't come from God loving Christ or Christ loving God. It is the failure of the externalization of God to man that creates the necessity of Holy Spirit. That is what the Trinity is in theological terms. We have a thesis, which is God. We have the antithesis, which is Christ. And then we have the failure of synthesis, which leads to the emergence of love and the community of the faithful. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to do a theology lecture, but that's how the Trinity works.
Yeah.
So love is, in a sense, remember I said love
Like
is
the binding.
Yeah, and I said it was both a revelation and something else. I forget what it is. I don't want to quote myself. And so the revelation part is important here because love is something that is appearance qua appearance. Love is appearance as appearance. There is no way to take love and to make it into an object. You also cannot personify love. Love is also not, strictly speaking, an excessive element. Love is appearance as appearance. It is the becoming of being. It is the consciousness of consciousness. Because it's not enough to just say, I'm aware of myself. And it's not enough to say, I'm aware of what I don't know. Because then we have that dualism.
Right.
What love does is it says, here is the concrete entity of the doubt of love and the love of doubt.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we've reached the very end, which is we said, can God be faithful? There's a passage from Chesterton, who writes a lot about Christianity. And Chesterton says, he's talking about a story that a child tells him about God going up to a mountain and praying. And Chesterton says, this is what is unique about the Christian God. Only the Christian God, Judeo-Christian God, would be a God that prays. A God that himself goes to pray. And so you ask yourself, if God prays, who does God pray to? I mean, I guess he could be like Snoop Dogg in his acceptance, in his like graduation speech, and God could say, I thank myself. Which, in a sense, Snoop Dogg as God works for me. But it's unlikely that God is praying to himself.
Right.
Or perhaps, and if God is praying to himself, we can say that's a deeply tragic experience.
Because it means that God has doubts about himself. God has faith or challenges of faith in himself.
And worse, God has no God. God has no master signifier. That's the fate of what it means to be God as a problem of God, if we see God in those terms. But I don't want to personify God too much here, right? So Chesterton has the idea of, does God pray? And then the question is, to whom does he pray? But again, we're asking the wrong question, chicken and egg. It's not who is he praying to, but who is praying? Is there a consciousness that can pray? I'm not saying this very well, but like...
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
So the question is, again, can God be faithful? Which you rightly said means, can God have doubts? Can God have to believe?
Right.
In other words. And so remember, we set up pistis. At the very beginning, we started with pistis as being the faithfulness of God. And traditionally, the battle around pistis is to say, can God have faith? And we said, we're not going to say, can God be loyal?
Right.
Well, what I would argue here is that it's actually a dialectic of the two. God has the problem of fidelity, the problem of loyalty, which is a loyalty to creation. God also has the problem of faith, which is the absence of knowledge. And so what God has is an impossible, like a cat stuck to a peanut butter toast when you drop it on the floor and it keeps like circling around. And I've seen this, right? God has the same structural principle, which is God has faith, and yet God knows everything. And faith, remember, faith means you don't have knowledge, yet God knows everything. God is also loyal, but he has no master. In other words, God exists not just as a paradox, but exists as a particular impossibility between every dualism in the world. In other words, when Christians say God is love, that is what they mean. God is the conceptual embodiment of the impossibility of being itself. And on a spiritual level, if you say that that is what God is, you suddenly realize that when you say God is everywhere, you're actually much more accurate than you think. Because that impossibility, the constitutive negativity, is everywhere. And so we've ended up in a really difficult bind, which is we've both proven, as it were, the existence of God, but also very much disproven the existence of God. We have created a God of nothingness.
Yeah.
A God that exists only of the space between concretion. And the Christian term for this, my friends, I know this is the last theological lecture of this year, is, of course, revelation. Okay. Revelation being central in Christianity. There is no linear place. There is no object. There is no self. There is simply the continual unfolding of being for which we have the concept of God as a placeholder. And it's up to you to decide whether you think that that means that God is very important or God doesn't exist. Technically, you could have agnostic position on this, as it were. And so we've come to, since the end of the beginning. And I want to point you, for those of you who are on Instagram and YouTube, I want to point you to the title of this lecture, which is Bonus Vir Semper Tyro. You know this one. No, actually, anybody don't remember. That's fine. So Bonus Vir means the good man. Semper means always. And Tyro has a double meaning. And it's from Goethe. Tyro means both novice, in other words, beginner, and it means a fool. And the title of this lecture is A Good Man is Always a Fool. And I mean this in a very specifically dualistic sense. To be a fool is to move away from knowledge. To be a fool is to have faith. To be a fool is to look at what comes before consciousness, what becomes before we talked about science. It's not the chicken and the egg, it's the principle of first. And to be a beginner means to move away from linear thinking. To be a perpetual beginner simply means that you don't believe in linearity. Because if you're always beginning, then the very process of your continuation is the act of beginning. And so the good man is always a fool, and the good man is always a beginner, means that we have specifically the idea of a dialectic man. If you will, a transcendental man, which is a man who is continuously in the process of beginning and is also continuously in the process of becoming less knowledgeable, more imbecilic, as it were. And so we finished these first three lectures, the first of the four chiasmic pieces, in which we've set up the relationship between nothingness and love. Now, in the next three lectures, we're going to have to set up the relationship between love and nothingness. So I think we can wrap it up here.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us for this Monday lecture, the last of our theological lectures. And I will be posting the accompanying song for this class in the stories on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
This has been absolutely wonderful. And thank you for trusting us as we continue to figure out how to do this project.
Yeah.
And it's almost Christmas.
Yes.
So Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
See you soon. Hey, everybody.